I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped out onto my porch and saw Mrs. Fuller's cat just sitting on my car hood, staring at my front door. Normally, that cat would run from me. Today, it just sat, fur all bristled, like it was waiting for me to do something stupid. The morning air was heavy, thick enough to taste, but it wasn't the weather that bothered me. There was this weird silence, not the peaceful kind you get when the neighborhood's still asleep. No, this was the somebody's watching you kind. I tried to shake it off, rubbing my temples and sipping at my lukewarm coffee. I told myself it was just another Monday, another routine, drop Mason at his mom's, head to the office, listen to Brent ramble about servers. But then I noticed it. A military van, one of those big matte green ones, parked right down at the end of the block. Doors shut, engine off, no one getting in or out. It had never been there before, and our street isn't exactly on the way to anywhere important. At first I wondered if maybe they were fixing a water main or something, but I didn't see any city workers, just that van, blocking half the sidewalk. Tinted windows pointed right at the bus stop. Mason was already annoyed, muttering about missing first period. He's got that sullen teenager thing down to an art. He shoved his earbuds in and barely looked at me as I drove him to his mom's, and I couldn't help but notice the people we passed on the way. More folks out than usual. A lot of them just standing on their lawns or peeking out their windows. I caught one old guy down the street clutching a garden hose with both hands, eyes wide like he was waiting for something to jump out of the bushes. 2 blocks later, there was a splatter of something dark on the sidewalk. Red, sticky. Probably ketchup, I told myself. Probably. My phone buzzed and then froze. Just stopped, mid-scroll, on a text from Tim. "Bro, you up?" Weird stuff outside hit me. The signal bars kept flickering between 1 and none, so I tried switching over to my work laptop, thinking maybe the router was acting up again, but even the Wi-Fi was glitching. Some pages loaded, most didn't. The news was all over the place. Strange flu cases in Midwestern cities. CDC confirms virus not contagious. Then, 2 seconds later, stay indoors. Official statement. Nothing added up. Mason's group chat went silent. My sister stopped answering texts. Even Tim, who lived literally next door, didn't answer when I banged on the wall between our apartments. Just a muffled thud and a curse. I started pacing, nerves twisting. I turned on the radio, hoping for music or maybe a weather update. All I got was static, then a voice cutting in saying something about an unusual situation developing. Great. As if that didn't make things worse. That's when I saw Mrs. Fuller, the cat's owner, out in her yard, talking to a cop. She looked pale, shaky, kept pointing at her hands. The cop wouldn't go near her. He just stood by his cruiser, notepad out, eyes darting between her and the street like he expected trouble from every bush. When she turned, I saw a streak of blood on her sleeve. I don't know if it was hers, but she kept scrubbing at it with a tissue that was already soaked through. She dropped it, and the cat started licking at the spot right away. By noon, the power flickered. I tried calling Mason's mom, but the call wouldn't go through. She texted back just 3 words. "I'll find here." But that was it. No smiley face, no nagging about picking him up later. That's not her. It hit me right then. It wasn't just a bad day. Something was happening, and nobody was talking about it straight. Everyone was either lying or too scared to say what they saw. My hands started shaking, not just from the coffee, but from the creeping sense that we'd all missed something important. That whatever was happening had started days ago, and we'd just kept going about our routines, heads down. I couldn't shake the memory of Mrs. Fuller's eyes, wild and unfocused, or the way she clung to that bloody tissue. I caught my own reflection in the hallway mirror, sweat beading on my forehead, and I realized I was doing the same thing, telling myself it was fine, that it was just the news being dramatic, that things would be back to normal tomorrow. But I knew better. I started dragging furniture in front of the door. I checked the locks, shut the windows, grabbed the old bat from my closet, the one I kept for softball games I never went to anymore. I texted Tim again. Get inside, something's not right. No answer. Outside, the military van was still there. One of the doors hung half open now, just a dark rectangle, nobody inside. The street was emptier than ever, but I could swear I heard something scraping down by the mailbox, like someone dragging their feet. I knew I had to get ready for whatever was coming, even if I was the only one who believed it. The night Mason was supposed to come back to my place, I barely slept. Every few minutes I'd find myself standing by the window, peeking through the blinds, convinced something was watching from the street. By 7 p.m. the sun dipped behind the houses and everything got even quieter. No cars, no porch lights flicking on. Even Mrs. Fuller's house was dark, and she never missed an episode of her reality shows. At first I tried to stay calm by doing normal things. Washing the dishes, sorting through junk mail, checking emails that wouldn't load. Then came the banging. Not a polite knock, but a heavy, clumsy pounding, like someone slamming their whole body into the apartment door. I froze in the middle of the kitchen. My first thought was Tim. Maybe he needed help. Maybe he'd finally listened to my texts and come over. I gripped the bat and opened the peephole, but what I saw made my breath catch in my chest. Tim was out there. Sort of. He was hunched over, one arm hanging loose, head tilted too far to the side like his neck couldn't quite support it anymore. His other hand was thumping the door in these slow, lazy arcs, smeared with something dark, darker than blood, almost black in the dim light. I whispered his name, but he didn't answer. He just pressed his face up to the wood, mouth moving, eyes wide and cloudy, not focusing on anything. I backed away, bat raised, phone shaking in my hand as I dialed 911. Dead air. Not even a busy signal. The banging got softer, turned into a scraping sound. I watched through the peephole as Tim slid down the door, leaving a greasy smear behind. He staggered back, arms limp, and I realized he wasn't alone. Someone else shuffled into the hallway, Mrs. Fuller. Her housecoat was torn, and her bare feet left smudges behind her. She didn't even seem to notice Tim. She just kept shuffling, hands twitching, head rolling like she was fighting off sleep. I heard screaming somewhere upstairs, and the sound made my stomach twist. Not a scream for help, more like pure panic cut off in the middle. That's when Tim and Mrs. Fuller both turned at the same time, their heads snapping toward the noise. Together they stumbled away from my door, out of view, following the screaming. I wanted to run, but I couldn't leave Mason. My first thought was to get to him, but I didn't even know if I could get out. I called his mom. Voicemail. I called again, my fingers slipping on the screen. Finally, I texted Mason. Are you okay? Lock the doors, don't open for anyone. No response. That's when it all really hit. This wasn't some weird virus, not the flu, not a prank or a blackout. The people outside weren't people anymore, at least not the way I remembered. I could hear more shuffling now, more bodies bumping into walls, doors, and each other. It was like a blind parade, moving toward anything that made a noise. That old saying about curiosity killing the cat? It was like they'd all become cats, drawn to sound, no purpose but hunger. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed anything sharp, kitchen knives, scissors, even a screwdriver. I stuffed them into a backpack, along with some bottled water and the emergency snacks I'd bought for road trips, but never touched. I considered trying the fire escape, but as I peeked through the blinds again, I saw two more figures wandering the parking lot. One was a guy in a delivery uniform, staggering in circles, fingers digging into his own chest. The other was a kid, maybe 12, limping, dragging one leg behind her. I felt sick. The building intercom crackled, and for a second I thought it was the super, maybe telling everyone to stay inside. Instead, there was just static, and then a man's voice, slow, mechanical, said, "Remain calm, stay in your residence, authorities are responding." I wanted to believe it, but I hadn't seen a cop car in hours. Just that military van, still at the end of the block, lights off, doors open. A crash from the hallway snapped me out of it. Something slammed against my door so hard the whole frame shook. I braced it with the chair and my shoulders, pushing back with everything I had. The banging stopped, replaced by this wet, slapping sound. It was Tim again. I could hear his voice, but not words, just groans, broken syllables, guttural. He was crying, or maybe just making noises because that's all he remembered how to do. I held my breath and forced myself not to scream. I texted Mason again, still nothing. I thought about busting out of the back window, but the alley was crawling with more of them. Neighbors I'd waved to every morning, now dragging themselves along the fence line, heads jerking up at every sound. The world outside had gone wrong, twisted in a way that made my skin crawl. The hallway filled with the stench of sweat, rot, something sweet and wrong. I stayed pressed against the door until I heard footsteps. Fast, heavy, human. A woman screamed again, closer now. Then a shot. A single gunshot echoing in the stairwell. I peeked out the peephole and saw someone, just a flash, a guy in a security jacket, running full tilt for the exit, chased by a cluster of bodies. I tried to stay quiet, tried to keep breathing steady, but every part of me wanted to scream or run or just give up. I wanted my son. I wanted my life back. Before military vans and bloody doors and neighbors who forgot how to speak. I stared down at my shaking hands and realized there was no going back. I forced myself to move. I reinforced the windows, blocked the vents, packed what I could carry. I knew I had to get to Mason, but I had to survive the night first. Every sound outside made me jump. My phone buzzed once. A notification, finally. It was from Mason. "You're dead. Something's wrong with Mom." That was all he sent, but it was enough. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't ready, but the dead were here and I had no choice. I read Mason's text over and over. The words blurred, not because I was crying, but because my brain just refused to believe what I was seeing. Something's wrong with Mom. That was it. No emoji, no follow-up, just those 5 words. I tried calling, but the signal dropped every time. The only thing that worked was that text, hanging on my screen like a threat. I spent half the night listening to the sounds in the hallway. Slow shuffles, dragging feet, a body thumping into a wall. At some point I must have nodded off, because I jerked awake to the sound of glass shattering from somewhere downstairs. That was the final straw. I threw my backpack on, grabbed the bat, and forced myself out the back door, slipping down the fire escape as quietly as I could. The alley was a nightmare. Trash cans overturned, someone's bike bent in half, a shoe lying in a puddle of something that used to be a person. I kept low, moving from shadow to shadow, hoping the figures on the street wouldn't notice me, but there was no plan. Just get to Mason, get to my son, even if I had to run through hell. Every window I passed had faces staring out, some pleading, some already empty. I saw one woman banging on the glass with her palms, mouthing help but making no sound. I couldn't stop. I felt like a monster, but I couldn't stop. I cut through yards, hopped fences, and ducked behind cars. Once, I almost tripped over a body sprawled across the sidewalk. A teenager in a hoodie, mouth open, eyes glazed. I told myself he was just sleeping, even as I heard something rattling in his chest. When I got to Mason's mom's house, everything was wrong. Her car was parked at a weird angle in the driveway, the front door half open. I gripped the bat and stepped inside, calling Mason's name. The place was trashed, furniture knocked over, dishes broken, the TV still blaring static in the living room. I followed the noise upstairs, every part of me screaming to turn back, but I couldn't. I found Mason in his room, sitting on the floor, hugging his knees to his chest. He looked up at me, eyes red, face streaked with tears. "She tried to bite me, Dad," he whispered. "She's not right." I pulled him into a hug, tighter than I ever had before. For a second it felt almost normal. Just my boy, just me. Everything else faded out. Then I heard the sound from the bathroom, the same sound I'd heard at my door last night, a slow, desperate scratching. I knew what I'd find, but I opened the door anyway. His mom, Sarah, was on the other side. She looked ruined. Clothes torn, blood running down her arm, mouth moving in a way that didn't make words. Her eyes found Mason behind me, and she lunged, hands reaching. I slammed the door and held it shut, tears streaming down my face as Mason sobbed into my back. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't just about survival. It was about what I'd do to keep Mason safe, even if it meant leaving someone behind. Even if it meant locking the door on someone I'd once loved. We barricaded ourselves in his room, pushing the dresser against the door. I could hear Sarah on the other side, fingers scratching, teeth gnashing. I kept my eyes on Mason, my hands shaking. I had to decide, stay and hope the world fixed itself, or go and find somewhere safer. There was no safe choice, not anymore. We waited for hours, listening to the world fall apart. At some point, the scratching stopped. That's when we heard shouting from outside, the neighbors, desperate and terrified, begging for someone to let them in. Then came the gunshots, closer than before, and the smell of smoke drifting in through the window. The house was no longer a shelter. Fire crept up the block, flames licking at rooftops. The world was burning, and the only thing I could do was run. I grabbed Mason's hand and we pushed open the window, climbing out onto the roof. Below us, the street was chaos, figures stumbling, houses ablaze, people screaming for help that would never come. As we jumped down and made for the edge of town, I knew the rules were gone. Right and wrong didn't matter. There was only me and my son, moving through a world that was never going to be the same. Every step hurt, every breath felt like a mistake, but we kept going. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt broken, hollowed out. I'd left people behind, locked doors on friends, run from neighbors, but I still had Mason. That was the thin line. As long as I kept him safe, maybe that was enough. We walked into the darkness, side by side, not sure what we'd find, not sure who we'd become. The old world was gone, and all that mattered now was surviving one more night.